Last week was the completion of the 9th week of the 2014 Kansas Legislative session. We're getting towards the end, and this coming week will really be the last week that most of the committees can finish their work and move bills forward if they really have a chance of passing. There's always an exception to that, but it's much more difficult to move a bill that hasn't at least passed one side and out of committee by the end of the week. Probably what remains the biggest unknown is how the legislature will react or respond to the recent Kansas Supreme Court ruling saying that the funding formula and the way that the state tries to divide monies to school districts is unconstitutional because it doesn't meet the basic requirements for equal education for students. And so that could have an impact on some of the budgets that have moved its way through the legislature. And so some of the committees will be spending considerable time this week seeing if they can find other sources of money, maybe change some of the state budgets to come up with as much as $129 million. So it'll be interesting to see how this all pulls together. In the midst of this, the Kansas Livestock Association is following quite a few bills. Most notably are 7 bills that are still pending. One bill, House Bill 2642, is a bill supported by KLA, and it attempts to make a correction in the 2012 state income tax change, which basically exempts income for limited liability companies, sole proprietorships, and some corporations. So many farms and ranches would fall into that category. One problem that's learned is that as people complete their 2013 state income tax is that if they had an operating loss but yet had gains through the sale of breeding livestock, they will in fact could owe more taxes than what they would under the previous law. So this bill is intended to allow the gain from breeding livestock to be offset by the amount of losses that occurred. Another bill, and by the way, that bill has passed the House Tax Committee. We expect this bill to be on the floor of the House sometime this week. Another tax bill that the association is advocating passed the House last year but remains alive for this year, Senate Bill 202, and that's simply to provide a sales tax exemption for equipment, facilities, and supplies to upgrade or build new livestock facilities. This is intended to be on par with other businesses as a way of incentivizing growth and new business ventures. That probably won't be decided till the end of the session, but we're hoping that that will be in the final big tax package. The association is supporting a bill, House Bill 2447, that has a lot of support beyond agriculture, and it's simply trying to lock in place the liability exposure from trespassers or people that come on the property without permission, trying to lock it in now so that Kansas doesn't adopt newer standards that judicial councils have identified. The bill that KLA is working with watershed districts and other parties is one that would give the Department of Agriculture the ability to hold and administer a conservation easement if it's required by the Army Corps of Engineers to do the mitigation and thus give the watershed district the permit they need to build the watershed structure. This will probably allow several pending watershed structures that have funding to move forward if it passes. That bill initially was House Bill 2654, but now it has a new number, Senate Bill 147, and it may be up for consideration on the House floor this week as well. An interesting bill to allow landowners to have first right of refusal on the antlers of deer that are poached on their property. That bill, House Bill 2538, has passed the House, is in Senate Natural Resources Committee, and we expect that committee to take the bill up this week as well. An interesting bill to give the state sovereignty rights over wildlife species, especially the greater prairie chicken and lesser prairie chicken, has received attention. This is Senate Bill 276. It passed the Senate, and the Senate the House Agricultural and Natural Resources Committee held a hearing on that bill last week. We expressed that we are definitely supportive of the intent of the bill, but really question whether it would help and could do some harm if the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service uses that as their interpretation of state policy and decides that by March 31 they will list the lesser prairie chicken as an endangered species. So it's difficult to tell what the right move is, but we believe there's some merit in waiting to see what happens with that listing that should come out towards the end of the month. Another bill that we're opposed to, Senate Bill 323, that bill would simply eliminate the ability for landowners to do conservation easements that would qualify for USDA funding, would prohibit easements, conservation easements, to qualify for federal income tax deductions and federal estate tax deductions, and also would make it probably impossible for watershed structures to get their permits. So it's one that we're opposed, and that may be considered next week as well. In the last few weeks, we'll continue to provide updates through our weekly KLA News and Market Report, and always welcome calls if you have any questions.